Right, so hello everyone and welcome along to the New Entrants to Agriculture Poultry meeting. This is funded by the Scottish Government and the EU, so thank you to them. So first up we've got Gordon and Maria from the Wee Broon Hens, who are new entrants to agriculture and have set up a small-scale laying enterprise selling direct to the consumer in predominantly Ayrshire. And speaker two is Robert Young from West Park Farm, who has worked off farm for a long time as an accountant until he decided he wanted to go home to the dairy farm, which to facilitate he had to diversify, and he'd done that by starting a kind of a large scale laying enterprise. And speaker three is Christopher Mcgarry, who is head of GP farming operations in Aviagen. And he's going to share his experience of working in the poultry industry as well as opportunities available to people interested either in working with Aviagen or farmers that are looking to diversify. All right, so I'm going to stop screen sharing, and Gordon and Maria, if you want to start.
So we're Gordon and Maria from the Wee Broon Hens. So we are first generation farmers and husband and wife team from Ayrshire. Currently we've got 500 free range hens and we sell direct to the consumers via a free doorstep delivery service. We like to try and keep our customers updated on what we do, how we produce our eggs, and just keep them updated on what we're doing kind of every day to kind of show where their food comes from. So I'm not from farming background. I started studying equine at Oakridge between 2012 and 2014. I always kind of knew, even when I was studying equine, I love my horses, but I didn't actually ever want to work in horses. I always wanted to work in agriculture, but not being from that kind of background, I thought people would laugh at me or wouldn't really be accepted. But I left college in 2014 and I got a job in a poultry farm, a laying poultry farm in Muirkirk, Old House Burn. So I started working there in December, so nearly 7 years ago. So I started working there in December part-time, quickly built my way up to being full-time, and then I was looking after a shed pet 2000. That's where I met Gordon. He was the manager there, so I was kind of running the daily side of the shed, but he was running the actual farm. I really enjoyed my job at the poultry farm, but I felt like it was as far as I could go. There was no progression for me, and I wanted to learn a lot more within the industry. So I went back to college and studied my HNC and HND in agriculture at SRUC in Ayr, and I completed that in 2019. And I've had various jobs working, doing lambings, milk recording, milkings, and I'm currently working part-time still as a carrier and a milker.
So I'm not from farming background either. I think my interest originally came from poultry when I was about 5 or 6, I think. Mum and dad had a few hens in the back garden, and I became interested from then. Once I left school, I wanted to go and do my HNC in poultry at Auchenprove. So over the summer of 2007, I got a job in a hatchery, just small scale. We hatched about 75,000 broilers a week. So I was there for a few months, and that got me into college. So I did my HNC from 2007 to 2008. After I finished at college there, I got a job in a farm at Pastured, made 60,000 caged hens. They also had a processing plant up in Glasgow. So I was there for about 9 months maybe, and then that was when I moved on. I got offered a better job at Old House Burn, and I moved up there with a shed of 32,000 to start with. I was running one shed to start with, and then over the next few years, I built up. I was a shed supervisor a couple of years later, and then I moved on to be the shed manager in 2014. I became the manager. So by that point, we had 96,000 hens, so it was 3 separate 32,000 units that they had. I was also, in 2016, I was chosen by Roman GB to go to Germany and do a was the women's school it was called, so it was basically, they took you out there and they taught you all about their breed and how to manage it properly, manage it better to get the best out of your birds, and what the sort of good points and bad points of them and what we could improve on them, and sort of general pointers and looking after them. 2018, I left Alderspun. I had quite a lot of experience behind me, and I thought, I want to go and do this myself. I've got enough knowledge, enough experience. I feel that I can go out and I can get my own hens and start that myself. So I left in 2018, and that was somehow I thought we were going to go and start our own business, but I wasn't sure how we get here to do it.
Yeah, so we started the business a couple of years ago now. Because we're not from farming, also it's obviously going to be difficult, so we just had to start. So we started with 30 hens. We bought 30 hens and an old garden shed from somebody in Gumtree, and luckily Gordon's boss allowed us to put our 30 hens on a wee patch of ground on his farm that he didn't use it. So selling direct to the consumers, it's the most efficient way for us to grow our business, obviously because we're starting off small. Primarily we were selling door to door and a couple of farmers markets. Then when the first lockdown happened, we had 80 hens at that point, and the deliveries just went crazy overnight. We were selling about 4,500 eggs a week. Something like 4,500?
No, it's 4.
3 or 4. Oh, right, okay. So we built a hen shed in 6 weeks. We basically ordered, it was 500 spent hens from Robert from West Park. We ordered 500 hens from him, and because there was no pullets available, so built the hen shed in 6 weeks, got the hens in, and yeah, started doing our doorstep deliveries through that.
Our biggest challenges of our business is really, the biggest I'd say, being the ground. So we don't own any ground, so it makes everything quite difficult for us. Where our shed's built, we don't have any electricity, so everything's right now it's naturally vented and natural light in it as well. Something that we've never really experienced before, because obviously working a large scale poultry unit, they all had, everything was all fully automated, all your lights, your ventilation and stuff, so it was quite a steep learning curve for us. It was a controlled environment. We built the shed completely ourselves with help from our family basically to build it, so it was quite a quite a steep learning curve for us compared to what we were used to.
I'd say another challenge as well is money, isn't it? Yeah. We still have to work.
We're both still working.
We're both still working. So Gordon works full time, and I work part time. So that's another challenge as well, is trying to juggle everything as well.
Yeah. So we both still work full time. So we do everything in the business ourselves. Trying to invest it. We've invested all our own money back into it, and anything that we've made, we've had to put back into it to keep growing and keep moving forward. We can't just sit still, and we're not entitled to any grants. We've got like new entrance grants and things because we don't own the ground, and the bit of ground that we do rent, it's not small enough to be, it's not big enough, sorry, because we need to have 7 acres before we can get a new entrance grant, but we don't have that. So it's quite challenging that way. There's no sort of funding for us, so everything's our own investment basically.
I'd say as well the fact that we have to do, we're doing everything, so we're up at 3 o'clock in the morning to do our deliveries, and we're doing our bookkeeping, our social media, packing eggs, looking after hens. Gordon's working full time, so it does get very stressful sometimes, but I don't regret doing it.
It's a lot of hard work, but it's good.
Yeah. And the future for our business is to continue selling direct to the consumer. With a bit of a twist as well, we've got something that we've been working on for about a year now. So we're going to announce that on our social media pretty soon, and we're really excited about it. It's something that it's going to be something new for Ayrshire, so we're excited about We've got our flock numbers increasing in January, so we're going up to 700 hens in January, and we're going to start producing our own Ayrshire honey as well. So we've got our first 2 beehives arriving next week. So anyone's into beekeeping, maybe you could give us some tips as well. Thanks for listening.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Gordon and Maria. And Robert, if you'd like to share your screen now, please.
Okay, so hope everyone can hear me first of all. My name is Robert Young and I farm in partnership with my mother and father at West Park Farm in Ayrshire. I'll give you a brief kind of history of myself and of the farm. So I'm 32 years of age just now, and when I left school, I decided that I wanted to get into accountancy. At the time, I wasn't 100% interested in agriculture. I did work on farm, but you know, I enjoyed accountancy at work at school, and I got an opportunity to join our company as a kind of apprenticeship style way of learning. So I joined the company after I left school, and from there I kind of worked my way from basically the T-boy to you know, doing audits and management accounts and cash flows, doing my exams at nights and weekends for 6-7 years. After about 5 years, I started to realise that I wasn't really enjoying working in an office full time. The farm was being more of a pull towards me, and I kind of decided that at that point a farmer was, you know, what I wanted to be, you know, going forward. Biggest problem that we had at home was the farm, you know, it's a pretty small farm. We had at the time 100 acres milking 80 cows. We were a very traditional setup, you know, grass cake in the summer, silage, fighter gold cake in the winter, you know, kind of medium output, medium input. And there just wasn't enough work and, you know, income for Dad and I to both be at home. We also had a parlour. It was very outdated. It was coming to the end of its lifespan, and we had a big decision to make, whether we come out of the dairy industry or we invested heavily. So I was very keen in the dairy cows, and we decided that we would invest in robotics. We looked at some parlours, but with me working off farm, you know, robotics was the best way for us to go. Allowed me to still continue to work off farm and still have a management say in the cows, as the robots kind of treats cows as individuals, and it meant I could deal with cows as individuals rather than dealing with a herd. So in 2012, we installed our first robot, and then in 2013, we installed our second robot, and I continued to still work off farm in the accountancy. I stayed there for another 2 years until I really got scunnered with working in an office. And at that point, I left and I went and worked on another dairy farm close by for 1.5 years, which, you know, was a really good experience for myself. Getting out onto another dairy farm, I learned a lot from 2, you know, very forward-thinking dairy farmers, father and son, and you know, it was good just to go and see, you know, different things. From there, I got the opportunity to work for Galley McLeod and an agricultural merchants in Stonehouse, where I worked for 3 years. Learned a lot there again. You know, was grateful for the opportunity to be there. Learned from a lot of good people, you know, travelled around farms, seen a lot of good operators, you know, learned a lot of things that I could bring back home onto the farm and try and improve what we're doing at home. But still, you know, this wasn't curing my bug of being at home full time. You know, I essentially just wanted to be at home farming. It was getting to a point that, you know, Dad wasn't any younger. The strain, the relationship between us two was getting harder because, you know, I wasn't at home as much as I'd like or he'd like. You know, there was things just weren't happening the way either of us would like at home. You know, things are, you know, getting left. You know, we're doing things, you know, all weekend, late nights, you know, and stuff like that. And it just wasn't ideal for anybody's work-life balance. And yeah, we just needed to, you know, find a way of getting, you know, me and Dad back at home full time. So we looked at various things. You know, we looked at increasing the dairy setup, and round about 2017, back end of 2017, I spoke to my cousin on the off chance at a party one night, and he's in the poultry industry currently, or wasn't, or still is in the poultry industry. And he mentioned that, you know, he was upscaling his poultry business again. And I just happened to ask, you know, if there was opportunities, you know, for new entrants into the poultry industry like us. Just happened to be that there was Noble Foods, who we supply eggs to, were looking for new farmers to come on board. There was a bit of a shortfall in eggs at that point, with, you know, egg production going from caged and colony eggs to free range eggs. They were looking to increase their free range egg numbers, and I was given a contact number for Noble Foods. I phoned them in November 2017 and arranged a meeting for them to come out and, you know, chat, see what options were available, and whether there was anything going forward that, you know, we could get involved in. So around about this time, it was decided that, you know, I had to come home. Like, it was just getting to a point that we were both needing home. So the decision was made January 2018. Mum and Dad would go to New Zealand for a month. I would come home, and that would be, you know, us, you know, me back home. It was a very good transition. You know, Dad went away on holiday for a month. I took over the farm. When he came back, it was, you know, it was quite seamless. So then in January 2018, Noble Foods came in. They brought a budget, cash flow and profit and loss for a 32,000 poultry unit that we were looking at putting up. So we'd a look at that, we'd a chat about different options and whether, you know, it would fit in our business, and whether, you know, Nobles would actually be keen on us being, you know, egg producers for them. So after then, I took the cash flow, profit and loss budget to a couple of different people that were in the poultry industry, just to kind of get an idea of, you know, is this budget, you know, worth its paper, worth the paper it's written on, or is it, you know, not far away from what you'd expect to see in a poultry flock. And luckily, you know, from both people said, you know, it's pretty doable. And if anything, you know, if you do things well, you can probably achieve a wee bit more than that. So that gave us something to work from. And when my dad came back from New Zealand, the two of us went and started looking at different poultry units, speaking to different poultry people. And Noble Foods took us around a couple of people as well that were supplying them, and it was good just to go around and, you know, speak to people in the industry, you know, get tips, you know, find out what they've done right, what they've done wrong, you know, and try and figure out what the best plan for us going forward was, you know, whereabouts to site it, you know, and just basically try and have a decision whether it was the right thing for us. So after going around numerous different places with numerous different people, we decided that, you know, we were pretty certain that this is what we wanted to, you know, how we wanted to diversify the business slightly, or add another enterprise, if you want to call it that, as it would allow me to come back home. It also, you know, allowed my sister to come back home. So now there's my dad, my sister and I, who the three of us run the dairy and the poultry unit, which, you know, was a very good bonus that, you know, it allowed me to come home, and again, allowed my sister to come home full time. So we, at that point, made up a business plan. The business plan was, you know, made up from the budgeted cash flow and profit and loss we were given by Noble Foods. We put it together along with our accountant, you know, and pretty much needed that because it was going to be a substantial amount of money that we were going to have to go to the bank and loan from them. You know, we you know, very little, you know, we're never going to be able to finance the project on our own. You know, we're pretty much needing the bank's help. So we put a business plan together. We spoke to our current our existing banker at the time, and we spoke to another bank at the same time. If we were going to go into that much debt, we wanted to make sure that we were getting, the right deal. So we were, we didn't want to, we just wanted to look about and make sure that we weren't doing anything silly. So put it to them, both had their reservations. Dairy farmers want to go into the poultry industry, but we're fortunate that we have my uncle and my cousins who are currently in the poultry industry that we can call on. We've got a bit of experience not far away from us that we have leaned on, and we still lean on every now and again for questions and answers, which we're very grateful for. So it took a couple of months, to get all the banks and questions answered, but eventually the bank decided that this was a project that they would back, and we just actually stayed with the current bank. There wasn't much in it, but to change banks wasn't very attractive, with all the paperwork and legal stuff that goes with that. It probably had a bit more cost, so I was very grateful that the current bank were able to back us. I think what helped us in that point was the fact that I had a background in accountancy. I was able to understand all the numbers, and I think if you are going to go into that much, level of debt, then you need to know your numbers. You can't. It's pretty essential. So it is, and even still, we do monthly budgets, monthly cash flows. The profit and loss, it looks nice, but the cash flow is always the most important one. We're always projecting what the cash flow will be over the next 3 months, just to make sure that we're going to be okay. In touch with everything's been fine so far, but I'm not going to lie, it was a huge worry at the time. We're very fortunate that we had the land and the dairy, behind us that we could put towards security. We couldn't, unfortunately, a new entrant can't just go into the industry, and put up a 32,000 unit hen shed without any kind of security. So we're a bit fortunate that we had the dairy behind us to put up a security. And I'm not gonna lie, it was a few sleepless nights at the time, wondering whether we were doing the right thing or whether I was just being stupid and getting ahead of myself again. But we went ahead with it. We started digging in September 2018. And the steel arrived in November 2018. We used a local contractor who dug, erected and finished the shed. We did look around at different quotes. Again, there was very little in it, and I was very keen to have one person running the project, as I was not wanting to be phoning every day, every morning, wondering why the digger wasn't here, the steel wasn't here, and having different teams blaming each other why things weren't happening as quick as I'd like. So I was quite keen to get one person in charge, and then nobody can blame each other. So in November 2018, the steel started going up, and we're running to a bit of a tight deadline, because birds were due to arrive in the May 2019, and there was maybe a week worth of movement, but the birds are coming that week and we needed accommodation for them. So the contractor's done a great job. They worked long hours and got the site ready for my internal fitters to come in February, and they took 8 weeks to get it ready for birds, and we're actually ready just a couple of weeks before birds arrived, which was good. The build went well. The only problem we had was with electricity. I'd recommend anybody who is putting any project up, small or large, to get the electricity sorted out very soon, as Scotch Power and all these companies, SB Energy, don't like talking to each other, and things drag on more than you'd like. But on a whole, the project went pretty well. So it did, and we were delighted with the finished product. Hens arrived in May 19, and at that point, you think, great, that's us, we're off to a start, you know, money will start rolling in, we'll start paying this off, and we'll not have to worry about anything. But you get hens in the first day, you don't start getting eggs for a month later, but you still have to start feeding them on day one. And, you know, hens need paid as well, so you need to start paying them on day one. So cash flow, again, is very key. You need to, when you're doing your original budget, well, first allow for a bit of overview, because there's always something that you forget about in the planning stage. There wasn't much we forgot about, but things always go over budget. And we needed a bit of a cash buffer going into the first couple of months. You know, even as the first egg lies, you know, you'll be a month before you actually see an output of, you know, a decent output of eggs. You know, you'll be a month before you get up to kind of 30,000 eggs a day. And then you've got to wait the lag for, you know, the invoices to get paid. So you could be 2 months of no income coming in. We're very fortunate the bank was able to still back us. We had to borrow a bit of an overdraft to see us over that time. Again, a few sleepless nights, wondering whether I was, you know, doing the right thing or not. There was nothing I could do about it at the time. We just had to ride the roller coaster and get on with it. And yeah, eventually eggs started coming, and, you know, invoices started coming, so we could start paying things off. But, you know, I'd still say even now, you know, what are we, just over 2 years on, you know, starting to worry a little bit less about it, and, you know, starting to think that actually maybe what we've done wasn't as silly as I maybe thought at the start. But, you know, it's starting to look okay now. Again, you know, for the last 2 years, you know, just been in constant contact with the bank, trying to keep them assured that everything's all right. Do regular cash flows for them and for our sanity as well. You know, it's myself that kind of runs all the paperwork side of stuff. And even, you know, just to give dad and mum a cash flow every month, just to go, look, this is what we've done in the last month. This is what I'm projecting the next 3 months. It looks okay. Don't worry about it. So yeah, I couldn't stress high enough just to, you know your numbers. And now we are into our second flock. Flock 1 went well. We had problems, teething problems. My sister and I were pretty green into the industry. We didn't know everything. We learnt a lot. We leaned on people a lot. We made a few mistakes, but going into flock 2, we're now starting to reap the rewards from, you know, their mistakes. And flock 2 is doing well. Flock 1 done okay. You know, it was on budget. There was a few, mortality was slightly higher than budget, but egg production was again higher than budget. But flock 2, you know, our budgeted mortality is going to be about half. You know, our mortality is going to be half of what budget is, and egg numbers is going to be, it's going to be higher than flock 1, unless, you know, anything was wrong in the last 3 months. But yeah, again, for those that don't know much about the poultry industry, you know, I probably should have mentioned at the start, you know, our shed holds 32,000 laying birds. It all goes to a contract to Noble Foods. It's a 15-month cycle. So 15 months from the birds coming in to the next flock of birds coming in. So we have the birds for 14 months, and then there's a month of downtime where we muck out the shed, we wash the shed, and we await the next flock of birds coming in. So overall, it's a 15-month cycle. But there is, again, a 2-month period that there is no income coming in. So you have to budget for that again. You have to make sure that you've got enough cash reserves that you can see over that 2 months. So, you know, again, you know, it'll be good when this flock goes out and then the next flock comes in, that, you know, I do think we'll you know, clear our feet and we'll be a bit more settled at that point, and we'll be able to start looking at maybe other projects that we've shelved for the last 2 years, you know, to concentrate on this. But yeah, that's hopefully, you know, I've told the story right. If there's any questions, anything I've missed out, you know, feel free to ask once I've finished.
Thank you very much, Robert. Very interesting talk. Again, as Robert was saying, feel free to ask any questions. We've got no questions in the Q&A box yet, so you are thinking of anything at all that you want to know, please do get it typed in there so we can answer it at the end. And we'll now move on to Chris Mcgarry from Aviagen. So Chris, if you want to start sharing your screen, that'd be great.
Good evening, everyone. So thanks for the introduction, James. I'm going to give you a bit of an overview on my background and how I became involved in the poultry industry, a bit about the company I work for, Aviagen, including who we are, where we are, and what we're trying to achieve, and also opportunities for people interested in a career more generally within the industry, but if anyone's interested in particular Aviagen, potential contract farming opportunities, and I'll follow up with some questions as well. So if we'd like to start, I'd like to just extend a thanks to James for organising this evening's webinar and allowing me the opportunity to speak. And I've certainly enjoyed listening to Gordon Maria's experience, as well as Robert's as new entrants into the industry. I guess I'm coming at it from a slightly different angle, working with a large poultry organisation. So it's a slightly different angle, but all the same concept, really. So you'll recognise straight away that my accent isn't of Scottish origin. Born and bred in Lisburn, Northern Ireland, and whilst I am from a farming background, I do not have a farm to return back to myself. Studied at Harper Adams, graduated in 2011, and all of Harper's degree programs require you to do a 12-month industry placement. And for me, I joined the Agri-Foods and Biosciences Institute in Northern Ireland, where I was part of the dairy unit team. So looking after all things related to the cows, health, welfare, milking, the whole lot, on the different grazing trials being undertaken by the research teams at the time. On my return to Harper, one of the modules I studied was sustainable animal production systems, which included pigs and poultry, two animals that I hadn't any previous experience with at all. The interesting side of this for me was that the whole of the program was delivered by industry. And the slide I've displayed here is the one that really sold the poultry industry to me. The rate of genetic progress was fascinating. So changes made at pedigree level take between 4 and 5 years to get through the broiler generation, and the multiplication factors are significant. So one pedigree cockerel and 10 females will go on to produce 150 great-grandparents, 7,500 grandparents, 375,000 parents, and they will go on to produce just shy of 49 million broilers, all from that one cockerel and 10 females over a 5-year period. That just blows me away. So Aviagen's vision is to play a leading role in feeding future generations by providing quality broiler breeding stock to produce a healthy and sustainable source of protein. And I needed to see it for myself. A few slides in the history. It dates back quite a bit. I've harvested these from other presentations, so I can't take any credit. Aviagen's history goes back as far as 1923, and it's as far back as one of the brands that still exists to this day, called Arbor Acres. More locally, at the site of our head office, where I'm sitting just now, Chunky Chicks began operations in 1956, and it was originally a hatchery. In 1957, Lohmann commenced its broiler breeding from lines imported from the US under the brand name Indian River. And you heard Gordon talking about when he went and visited Germany and Holland for the Lohmann schools. It is a brown bird, and that's initially where we started. In 1962, Chunky Chicks became part of the Ross Group, and this was again rebranded in 1972 to what people around Scotland were more familiar with, Ross Breeders. The Aviagen Group was then formed in 1999 with Aviagen UK and Aviagen Inc. And this was used as the company's trading name for Ross, previously known as Ross Breeders, Arbor Acres, and Lohmann Indian River, brands all formed in the year 2000. Aviagen was then acquired by the EW Group in 2005, Now, the EW Group are 100% family owned. It's a German family, the West Johans, and the family are very much committed to the broiler breeding business, but do have other business interests in animal health, vaccines, SPF eggs, animal nutrition with feed additives, as well as other genetic businesses. So they do have poultry and also fish enterprises. The last slide then takes us to our current position. So in 2014, Aviagen introduced the first of its specialty products, the Rowan range, which is the brown bird. And then in 2015, the Yield Plus meal in the USA. The most recent expansion to our business then was the acquisition of Hubbard Breeders, who are the market leaders in slower growing breeds and who operate completely independently of Aviagen. Where we were back in 1960 to where we are today. So in the early days of breeding programs, selection was very much based on egg production and live weight, with a little element of feed conversion ratio, or FCR, to get more chickens to market. Today, we are very much focusing on a balanced and sustainable chick by focusing on breeder traits, live broiler traits, processing traits, and more importantly, welfare traits as well. On some of the lines today, we're measuring closer to 80 traits as we evaluate the results of the brothers and sisters of the lines we're selecting. So no individual bird is selected on its own characteristics. The data is all collected, it goes in, and birds are selected on the value of their families. The brothers and sisters, the parents, and then subsequently their offspring as well, add value back into the data sets too. Quantifiable traits are measured and then statistically analysed by the big computers along the corridor, and our future pedigree birds are then selected to continue the breeding programme. It's very important probably to say Aviagen is a genetics business, and people sometimes get very confused with what genetic means. We do not genetically modify the birds, and probably for the audience I'm speaking to tonight, it doesn't need to be said. Everything is happening in the pedigree program is selective breeding. So I think that is quite important to say. As a business, the owners, the German owners, invest very, very heavily into the R&D side of the business. And this is to ensure we meet the needs of the customers, their ever-evolving markets, and also that we remain competitive. As time goes on, we do advance our technologies. And at the beginning, we talked about what the selection traits were, very much visual selections. And as technology has improved and it's become more affordable, it's allowed us to improve our selection technology as well. So in 1990, we first used the oximeter to measure oxygen saturation in the blood. This helped us to reduce the levels of ascites seen in the birds and subsequently heart attacks, so a healthier bird at the end of it. Roll on to 2005, the Lexoscope. So it's a handheld X-ray device that was developed by NASA to look for cracks in metal. We use it to look for tibial dyschondroplasia in the hips of the chickens. And at the time, there was levels of up to 30%. And if you saw the birds, normal gait would be like this. The gait was going out the west. So we've now got that down to less than 5% at the current position. And we're ever improving that, but the advances are becoming less and less as it improves to such a high level. Use of ultrasound initially to help measure yield, but we've now moved on to using CT scanners. And this technology, when it was introduced, there's a lot of work with different universities to try and get the algorithms to work so you could select breast yield, etc. on that. And then, as I touched on previously, genomics, so helping to look out for gene markers and aid selection accuracy. I guess more and more often this has been used across the agricultural industry now. But I think the poultry industry is very much the market leader or the forefront running ahead with this. And then probably finally, just as important as everything else, the study of gut health and the effects of prebiotics, probiotics, as we try as an industry or as a sector, I guess, just to move further and further away from antibiotics. Back to me again. I don't mean to go back, but end of my days at Harper, I applied for 2 herd manager positions and 2 jobs within the poultry industry. The dilemma then came from me when I was offered a herd manager's position and a management trainee position with one of the poultry companies. 10 years later, I'm still with the poultry. I have always been one to seize opportunities as they rise, and Aviagen is no different. I started in 2011, back in September, so I'm 10 years with Aviagen this September. And I'm not sure if it's a regret, but certainly at the same time as I was starting Aviagen, all my friends from uni were heading to the Southern Hemisphere to watch the Rugby World Cup. Maybe I should have pushed back my start date, but I had a career that I needed to get ahead on. So, my first week with Aviagen was quite a shock to the system, having previously been used to working outdoors with cattle, or as I've mentioned in the previous slide, harvest work. At the end of my first week in the business, it was already quite an eventful week. My first day was very eventful, but at the end of the first week, I was called into the office just as I was passing the way home, and I didn't think much of it. And I certainly wasn't prepared for the question, Chris, are you sure this is the job for you? Now, I was caught off guard, but I answered honestly, and I had been quite standoffish, but it was because I was in awe of what was happening around me. Never before had I worked in 34-degree heat with 45-gram chicks running about my feet as I try and navigate size 10s around them. So just when I was used to being outside, working with cows and machines, it was a big culture shock. So I asked my boss at the time, Ivor, to give me a couple of weeks and I would come back to him and give him an honest answer. To this day, I don't think I ever have given him the honest answer. But it wasn't until I got a good understanding of the process and saw other areas of the business that I thought that there was a future in this for me somewhere, maybe just not a pedigree. The irony then being that I spent 3 and a bit years as a production manager looking after the pedigree growth farms, before moving sideways into the more commercial side of the business, where I currently work with grandparents. I've worked with breeders since 2015, and my biggest fear, having only ever worked with broilers previously, was double-edged. Will the birds come in to lay, and then will they produce a fertile hatching egg? They certainly seemed to know what they were doing, which took a lot of pressure off me. My current position within the company is head of GP farming operations, and with that, my team and I are tasked with looking after 22 farms across Scotland and the north of England, and with that then the production of roughly 58 million hatching eggs into the parent stock market and 38 different countries over the last 12 months. Breaking that down a wee bit into regions, 44% of what we produce goes into the Turkey, Middle East and Africa region, 32% remains in the UK, and then 14% into Europe, with 10% going rest of the world. And we will ship as far away as Japan and the Philippines as customers who want stock from the UK. When I initially moved across into the grandparent side of the business, I was responsible for a number of farms in the west of Scotland, near Sturton, and also in the Dumfries area, as well as my first real experience of working abroad with the Arbor France operation in the southwest of France, near Bordeaux. We do have other operations in France, but this was very much an extension of the UK operations. And like everything we do as a global business, was there to provide resiliency in the event of a disease outbreak. And we could still continue to meet the customer's needs. So in the chicken world though, the birds are very similar. They're coming from the same great-grandparent stock that I received the stock from in the UK. The major difference between Scotland and the southwest of France is the climate. We're used to long, wet winters with the odd days of warm weather in the summer, whereas in the Bordeaux region, they're more inclined to long and intensely hot days in summer with some frosty days in the winter. So we invest considerably more in heat and insulation. whereas in the southwest of France, there's a lot more investment in electricity to power the fans that are pulling air through cool pads that remove the heat from the air, so rudimentary air conditioning. One of the other elements that has allowed me to travel and see different operations around the world is my involvement with animal welfare. And I head up animal welfare for the chicken group in the UK. Been very fortunate. This has taken me to USA several occasions: Hungary, Poland, Australia, and New Zealand. With Australia and New Zealand probably been the highlight to date, given I didn't get there in 2011. So plenty of experiences along the way. In terms of job opportunities, I guess one of the advantages that we have as a larger business is we have more than just production on offer. I could talk production all night long. It's what I know best. But we are looking for people out with the production dome as well. So I'm always looking for people that can work with other people and work with birds as well. It's very difficult to get a good balanced character like that. My core production team is made up of 4 others, of whom 2 of them, like myself, are from a cattle background and 2 of them are from a poultry background. And I think what I'll be very clear on is that if you have the skills working with a 4-legged animal, these are very easily transferable into different species, and you should never let that lack of experience put you off rising to any challenge. Robert certainly touched on it as well. I liked how he talked about the robots offering him the opportunity to manage cows on an individual basis. That's what it's all about. So whilst the backbone to everything we do is very much farms and hatcheries and their respective teams, we couldn't function independently. And there are a number of teams in the background that ensure the operations run smoothly, that are hatching eggs and chicks arrive safely with our customers. Those who transport the eggs and chicks, the sampling teams who monitor the health status of the birds and deliver samples to the labs, whether it's serology, bacteriology, virology, or even genomics teams. We also have an in-house veterinary team, export specialists, planners, nutritionists, finance, IT, HR, technical support, and marketing functions. So it's not just the hands-on chicken people we're looking for. We'll branch out everywhere. So if you know anyone, let them know we're looking for people. We do take on 2 students every year. This year, both of them are coming from Harper Adams because we didn't have any uptake from SRUC. This hasn't always been the case. We try and get 1 from Harper and 1 from SRUC to keep it balanced. Typically, the students would be production-based, spending 6 months with the farm teams. So 3 months, 3 months pedigree, 3 months GGP, GP, and then 3 months with the hatchery, and then an abroad element as well. So 3 months with one of our other business units. Unfortunately, over the last 2 years, the abroad element has not been there. But hopefully we can resume that again at some point in the future, as I think it was a benefit to both parties. They can share experiences that they've had in the UK with that team, and then they can bring back some experiences to us as well. The most recent addition to my team finished Harper this time last year, and had previously spent time with us as a student as well. And he's in the picture, young Wilson. Had the opportunity then to spend some time in the GGP operations over in Elkmont, Alabama, and then rejoined us this time last year, and is doing quite well. For someone that hasn't really had the opportunity to manage people before, and the poultry side of things, he had spent time with us, he had learned plenty, brought some ideas back from the US, but trying to merge that all together and move forward. He's certainly doing a good job just now. We have in the past, as I mentioned before, had some SREC students join the business, and you might know some of the names. So the first one that might be familiar is David Struthers from Miss Mahego. He joined the same time as I did. initially as a student and then came back as a production manager for GGP. David left the business a couple of years ago to return home to help run a second dairy unit on the farm. Craig Hamilton from Darvel joined the business as a GGP production manager as well, before returning home about 18 months ago to set up and run a great-grandparent unit at the home farm. And just now, he's busy preparing for the second flock coming in just next week. And then most recently, Jenna Morrison from Near Air, who spent some time working with SRUC after her degree before joining the Scottish Government and then joining Aviagen as a management trainee. And she now oversees the quality assurance on the pedigree side of the operations. I am nearly finished, guys, but don't drift off from it. Another route Aviagen could offer for a family looking to diversify their existing business is a contract farming option. Now, first off, this is a big commitment for both parties as we intend to enter a long-standing partnership. So we don't go into it lightheartedly. And again, it's what Robert said about financial strains in the business. It will put strain on your business to get to the point where we have the houses stocked and you receive your first rental check. You see in these pictures just beside me here, this is a farm that we're currently building near Kelso. And even just today, a conversation, an unexpected cost that's come in. Well, it was expected. It was the increase that wasn't expected from the original quotation that we had. So the contract farmers maybe would be disappointed with me. But it's a long-term commitment we have for each other. So hopefully it pays out in the long term. We'll spend many an hour sitting around the kitchen table looking at the viability of the different sites, and our vet team will do biosecurity risk assessments in the surrounding area as well. And that's to protect yourselves as it is much to protect ourselves, because we want it to be a long-term venture, not just short-term cut ties quickly. Our business is built around biosecurity and promoting the health and welfare of our birds. So when looking for potential sites, this is at the forefront of my mind. What am I looking for? The ideal site is 5 acres with no other livestock within a couple of miles. The reality is, though, that that's impossible. So we'll look at sites pragmatically and we'll risk assess them on an individual basis. I will not be looking at sites that fall within 2 miles of another commercial poultry operation due to the risk of disease. And that works both ways. If we happen to get something, we'll give it to our neighbours, or if something comes in the air to us. The site doesn't need to be grade 1 land. However, the flatter it is to begin with, the less expensive it will be for groundworks. I would be interested in the site on the darkest days of winter in the wet to see how well the surrounding areas drain. I don't want a temporary pond that the geese like to come and reside to for a couple of weeks each year because of the risk. And you'll see maybe just in this bottom picture, a bit of extra drainage in here. The land's great, but there was just a bit of a puddle at the bottom that hopefully we've now sorted out. Intensive dairy systems do make me nervous based on the protein element of the feed and the salmonella risk from these. And whilst they might not even cause subclinical issues with cows, they do create an issue for me. So from a livestock point of view, I guess I'd be more inclined to look towards a spring calving system or an extensive grass-based, other extensive grass-based livestock systems. Now, the above list isn't meant to put people off, but it is about highlighting the biosecurity and the importance we place on maintaining that flock health and welfare and your investment, and as well as our own. So with that, I am done. I will hand it back to James, who I hope has got some questions to challenge Robert, Gordon, and Maria with. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris. That was very interesting. So I'm just going to, before we go into questions, I'm going to share my screen again, and we'll just talk through some things that are kind of available to help you if you are considering changing. So the Farm Advisory Service, as well as this kind of knowledge exchange service that's happening just now through the webinars, through the Farm Advisory Service TV channel, the YouTube channel, and the podcasts. We also do one-to-one advice that is grant funded. So this comes in the form of an integrated land management plan, which is funded 80% up to £1,200. So that kind of plan, it's really a kind of a business analysis plan. Really kind of with that plan would come in and would look at the existing business if there is one. If there isn't a long established business, to be eligible, you do need a BRN, you do need a business reference number. So there has to be a certain level of existing business to be eligible to access this funding. But if you've got a business, so say if you just started up in the first year, we don't necessarily have to look at what's happened in the past or what you've done in the past, experience-wise, or your kind of past agricultural business. It can be a kind of a tool to actually kind of build financial projections with a view to what you're going to do in the future, instead of actually looking at what you've done in the past. But typically it is existing businesses that are wanting to look at what they're doing and how they can improve, and looking at options to diversify and things like that are all part of the plan. I mean, once they've done that, that opens up your ability to apply for specialist advice funding, so that you can get 2 specialist advice plans, which are, depending on what option you choose, they are funded between 80 to 100%, but majority are funded 100%, and that's funded up to £1,000. So that's another £2,000 worth of advice you can get. So that's things like for kind of typically it can be an existing business wanting to look at their animal nutrition, so we could get a nutritionalist in to look at that, or it could be looking at the soil nutrition, so you get a kind of soil scientist or a consultant to come and sample the farm and perhaps dig some kind of pits to discover if there's any kind of signs of compaction and look at worm activity, things like that. But again, there's a lot of different options in the plan, so I would encourage you to have a look at that. The other plans that are available, the carbon auditing as well. I'm sure a lot of us are aware that kind of climate change is the kind of hot topic of the day, and that it is kind of coming to farming, that we're going to, there's already been schemes such as the beef efficiency scheme where we've had to monitor our kind of carbon footprint through carbon audits. So there's actually funding there to cover carbon audits. So if it's your first carbon audit, there's funding for £500 to get a consultant to come and help you with the carbon audit, to do the carbon audit for you, as well as write a report based on the results of that and giving you recommendations on how you can decrease your carbon footprint. And any carbon footprint after that is still eligible for funding, but it would be funded to a low level of only £250. So if you're interested in any of that that's been mentioned, I would highly recommend it. As not just as a consultant, but as a farmer myself, I have used all the funding available to look at the business at home, and it has been massively beneficial for us. So if you want to know anything more about that, either get in contact with your local SEC office, or you can look at the Farm Advisory Service website, which is at www.fas.scot. And if you've enjoyed this meeting and you're interested in more poultry meetings, there's a Croft and Small Farms meeting coming up, which is kind of more aimed at kind of new entrants and kind of small scale developers. So it is more aimed at that, but there is going to be the Scottish Government Poultry Officer, as well as an SRUC vet covering hen welfare. So it would actually benefit anyone that is new to poultry, even if you're thinking of going little or large. And the link there is at the bottom of the slide as well. So now we'll move on to the questions. So hopefully some people have put up some questions. If not, I've got a long list. That's the way we go. No questions have been asked yet. So I don't know if, if that's not working, you'll see a different thing from me in the question. So that's the host question panel. So I can't actually type questions, but you can see there's been no questions asked. So if you would like, well, if it's not working, if somebody could go in the chat box and let me know it's not working, and we'll just put the questions in the chat. If it is working and everyone's just been shy, that's fine. I've been writing out questions as I've been going along, so I'll just start asking along there. So I'm going to stop sharing just now. So Chris, we've got a question in the chat box here for you. Could you tell us how the broilers are put to production? Are they slaughtered in the factories or on farm?
The pedigree ones, I guess that will be. So they go to a mixture of commercial slaughterhouse as well as we have involvement with SRUC as well, who put birds through for us. Right,
thank you. So hopefully that answers your question. If you're meaning the more kind of end of the line broilers, I would imagine they'd all go to a commercial slaughterhouse. Mostly. Breeder. No, like the end of line, like the actual kind of the broilers, the kind of bottom of the pyramid, if you like, Chris.
Yes, so I guess commercially all broilers will go to commercial broiler houses. In the industry, on the commercial broiler industry, it is mostly large integrations, and they then their parent stock, they'll have the broilers, and then they'll have the full feed mill operation as well. So it's all done in house.
Yeah. So Robert, did you consider other egg packers, and what breed did you consider and go with?
I'll be honest, I didn't actually look at any other egg packers at the time. I had family that had a contract with Noble Foods, and for somebody new coming into the industry, I wanted to make it as easy as possible for myself. I didn't want to, go too gung ho and go into another packer. I was going to use my uncle, my cousins for a lot of advice, and I knew, they'd be able to help me out with the packer a lot. Maybe I should look at other packers, but I'll be honest, I didn't look at other egg packers, and I know there are other egg packers out there. We went with Wee Broon Hens. Again, we looked at various different breeds, and I guess it's just down to personal preference at the time. Everybody was looking for large eggs. Wee Browns, are still, are prone to give you a larger egg size. And I went with them, and I was very happy with them. My first flock, I stuck with them. My second flock, I'm delighted with this flock. If I can get this flock, every flock, I'll be ecstatic. And I went for Wee Browns again, going into our third flock. And yeah, ideally, our shed is set up. I should have explained that it's two 16,000 sheds back to back, and the eggs all pull through the two sheds, so we can't actually split out the two sheds' eggs numbers. Ideally, if I was doing it again, I'd probably keep the two egg belts separate, so that in the future I could maybe do a 16 Wee Browns and a 16 other breed to see if I've seen any difference. But unfortunately, I can't do that trial. And I'm pretty happy with Wee Browns now. Unless anything changes, I'll probably just continue.
Thank you. Thanks, Robert. So, Chris, does Aviagen breed for the organic market?
Thank you so much. Yes, we do. Being at the top of the pyramid for the breeding programs, we will have different lines to suit different markets, yes.
Yeah. So, Robert, back to you again. Do you sell any eggs at the Farmgate? Robert, you're muted.
Sorry, classic. No, we don't sell eggs at the Farmgate. They all go wholesale. There are a few eggs that we sell to local people, but not in any kind of scale. It's mostly kind of family and friends that it'll take kind of eggs from us. We did look at maybe putting in selling eggs and milk at the Farmgate, but we decided against that at the time. A site is maybe not ideal, you know, looking at biosecurity. They would have to come onto the poultry unit, and it's just going to get busy, and we don't have enough space. And I just decided to shelve the idea at the time. So no, we don't currently sell at the gate.
Thank you. So Gordon and Maria, I've got a question here for you. I mean, they're asking if there's any kind of hidden areas, kind of pitfalls and things to look out for when setting up a small poultry flock. Is there any kind of things you didn't expect to encounter?
The biggest challenge I think was building a shed that I think I've found.
Personally, if we could do it again on the scale that we're doing it, I'd personally go for a polytunnel. Also at the time we built the shed, it was during, I think it was still during the first lockdown, so it was literally us and our families, we built it. So yeah, there is areas like definitely room for improvement. The lighting problems, there's too much natural light coming in, the ventilation.
A lot of problems could be solved if we had electricity though on the site, but it's an expensive thing to put in, which is maybe, I don't know, maybe something we should have considered more.
Yeah, but we didn't really think about it too much because we just knew the orders are flying in, get the shed built, get the hens in.
Yeah, it would, because it's not on the ground as well, we're kind of hesitant to spend too much money on it until we potentially have ground of our own that we would then invest the money into. It would be a better investment if it was our own instead of somebody else's. But it's working away okay just now, but I think that's the biggest thing.
Thank you very much. So Chris, where do you see the future of the genetic development in the broiler industry going? What's next?
That's a good question. I don't know. There's a number of drivers, I suppose. Land use, we've talked about sustainability there, land use, and there's a drive for an ever more sustainable bird. So by reducing or improving the FCR, the feed conversion ratio, so how far will 1 kilo of feed take in terms of meat output? But on the flip side, then you have certain governments, the Dutch government being one of them, that have said they don't want a standard fast-growing bird. They want a slower-growing bird. So you've got this market balance the whole time, and it's really what individual countries want. The fastest, most developing markets at the minute are Africa and Asia. Africa is a massive market, and I think one of the big challenges in the industry more generally, not just poultry, but on all livestock sectors, is animal transport times. There's a lot happening in the background at the minute with that. So it's about getting birds more local, regional bases, so the birds aren't having to travel. The portfolio of products that fall under the brand are quite fascinating. If you go to Brazil or India, you'll have naked necks. So birds that are missing the feathers from that section of their neck as well as their breasts, just to allow heat dissipation. And it is fascinating. I think it's fascinating. The whole industry is fascinating. The difference between the broiler breeder and then what Gordon, Maria, and Robert are working with on the lens side. It's the difference between your I was going to say Belgian blue, your British blue, and your Holstein cow. But it's the genetic potential's always improving, and it's what the consumer wants, or what the supermarkets are driving the integrators to push for. Sorry, that was very long-winded.
That was good. It's good. So this is a kind of question for Gordon and Maria. So that you both went to SIUC for a bit. Do you think that the time there doing that kind of an agricultural qualification helped you in your careers and your own business?
I'd say it definitely helped me, because when I went to work at Old House Farm, it gave me, I understood the process and what was going on in the layers. And that's maybe something that's silly now, but I had a total understanding of what we're doing kind of thing. I felt it was a step ahead of everybody that was there, just with more knowledge and experience. I had some experience, but although it was sort of limited at the time, in terms of just now in our business, it's all because I had the knowledge to start with, and then I gained the experience. It's all kind of came together now for running our own business. It's all, I think, has been beneficial, definitely.
I think studying at SRUC, obviously I studied agriculture, so there wasn't a lot of poultry in that course. So for the poultry side of things, it didn't really help me, but I think it's made me a bit more, probably more forward thinking for the business side of things. I look at things differently than Gordon. He kind of, I would say he focuses more on the hens and what has to be done, and I'll kind of think more forward about things. The business is.
Yeah, I'm looking at business.
Yeah,
it works well together, I think.
Yeah, I think we merge it well together. Yeah, because of that.
Because of both our qualifications, it all comes together nice. There's not like it's all one-sided.
Yeah.
It's quite good.
Yeah, we do actually have a lecturer from SRUC Edinburgh in agriculture here listening in. So he's a bit of a poultry enthusiast, or the actual kind of mechanisation around it. So he might actually take the idea to try to introduce more poultry into the curriculum forward.
Yeah.
So another question for you, Gordon. It's next, Gordon and Maria. So where do you see kind of sources of finance coming from to expand your business in the future?
Finance. Right now, we're just reinvesting everything that the business is bringing in. I suppose we'll get to a point where we'll probably have to go to the bank and borrow when we feel, probably when we've got our own ground and we feel we can go, we'll build a more purpose-built shed, like Maria was saying, like a polytunnel or something like that. We'll go to the bank and say, right, this is what we've done, this is what we've got. We're looking to modify the system we've got, improve it, and here's what we're going to do, it kind of thing. Once we're a bit more saying what we're doing, once we feel a bit more established and
once we've got our own land.
Yeah, sort of got our own ground, we'll be more settled in what we're doing and where we're going.
I do think we're very fortunate. Like, although we're not eligible for any subsidies or new entrance grants or whatever, that we've put our life savings into the business, and I suppose we're very fortunate to be in a position that we don't have anything that we owe the bank at the minute. I know it means we have to continue working. I'm part-time, Gordon's full-time, but we also don't owe the bank any money as well. So in that kind of sense, although we're struggling, we're not owing any money. So it
makes things harder, but at the same time, it's a nice position to be in. You don't owe anybody anything. But yeah, I think at some point we probably will have to borrow money for it to expand in the future.
Yeah. So this is another question here. It's quite a open question. So we've got an attendee wondering what the speakers think. So all three of you can answer. Just shout in if you want to. What do you think of Joel Salatin's Pastured Poultry Production? If you're familiar with the system.
Can you repeat that? I never heard that.
It's I believe he's an American guy, Joel Salatin, and he does poultry. He runs a kind of pastured poultry production system.
Well,
and just wondering what he's just chickens on pasture. Yeah.
Well, from my experience from learning about rotational grazing with like dairy herds and beef herds, I think it's a beneficial thing anyway. It was something that I would be keen to do in the future, with the rotational grazing for hens, if that's what it's.
Yeah, because you get like your mobile polytunnels and stuff. That's what you're quite keen for a mobile one. Whereas we'll see what happens in the future. But yeah, that's a kind of rotational grazing, I suppose. Being able to move.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good thing.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Now, I think I might be totally wrong, but I'm pretty sure Joel Salatin was on the Joe Rogan podcast. Not 100% sure. So, Robert, kind of what sort of time do you hope to pay off the shed? What's the kind of payback period?
All kind of really depends. I'll be honest, we've done the loan with the bank over as long as possible if we could. Another reason we went in the existing bank, they were giving us a longer payback period, over 20 years, which, I think if you're going to loan that amount of money, do it as long as you can, because cash is going to be king. and you can always, if you do earn more money, put it aside. You can invest in other projects, or you can just pay the loan back quicker. You know, I do hope to have the shed paid off long before that. It was budgeted at kind of 10 to 12 years, but again, it all depends on how you do it. You know, your own performance, you know, and about things out with our control, and there's an egg price, feed price. But you know, I'm pretty sure we budgeted it between 10 and 12 years of being paid off. Hopefully.
And what kind of time frame would you have to kind of reinvest in a new shed or a kind of upgrade?
A very good question. You know, the shed's built to a very good standard. You know, I hope it's still there for a very long time. You know, I don't envisage it needing to be, you know, updated. In terms of the internals, I was very, very impressed with the quality of kit as well. But again, you know, the motors are not going to last forever. So again, it'll just be, you know, I'll wait and see, and I'll probably have to invest in maybe motors a period. But the whole internal system should last for a very long time. But there will be bits like motors and belts. I mean, I've already to change muck belt. Muck belt runs along the floor. You know, they're got a very dirty job, and are prone to maybe breaking. But again, it's maintenance. You know, I've learned very quickly how to maintain the belt as best as possible, and you know, make it last longer. And if you keep in touch with things, then you know, things don't break just as quick.
Mm-hmm. So, thank you very much, Robert. Chris, how has Brexit affected Aviagen's operations, or has it at all? Is it?
It has affected us, not as much over the last 12 months as AI has, actually, in fairness. So whilst Brexit does get the blame for a lot of things, even influenza has been a much bigger challenge for us in terms of export. So there's certain countries won't take stock from England, and our hatcheries are English based, Stratford upon Avon and Rugby. So if there's avian influenza in country, they just say no, they don't want it. So we've had to ship a lot of eggs from Lockerbie, where our egg depot is, across into Northern Ireland, down through the Republic of Ireland, and across into France. Brexit has caused issues in terms of stamping. So I guess we have the ability to stamp on farm, but with Brexit, you had to stamp hatching on the eggs as well as your UK flock number, and we can't do that on farm. So it's put an awful lot of pressure on the egg depot, and we used to be able to palletize our eggs for export. Now they have to be individually boxed, so our capacity was reduced by a third at the same time as AI hit. So there's more egg orders, and capacity was reduced by a third. So Brexit, not so much as avian influenza.
Mm-hmm. So this is again an open question to all the panelists. If any of you know the answer, or any of the attendees, if you know the answer to this, please do write it in the chat box. So why is duck egg production not as popular as chicken egg production? Is it a productivity issue? Does anyone know? I mean, I'd imagine it'd be simply the market isn't there.
Personally, I think for us, we've been told it's the ducks are more sensitive.
They're more temperamental, so they can be put off the lay quite easily. So you're like there's no constant production, but like that's not from personal experience. That's just from
talking to people that we've been told.
Yeah, I mean that sounds like a good answer to me. Robert or Chris, do you have any knowledge?
The only knowledge I have is from the south of France. Whenever there's avian influenza, and ducks can live with avian influenza quite happily, and the chickens then just get hit very hard. So the ducks won't affect them. The chickens, bang, away they go. There are duck breeding units down south. I can't remember what the duck is you buy off the shop shelf, as in breast meat. Cherry Valley. And they do quite a lot of duck breeding, but it's more the meat market going into Asia. A duck egg's very thick as well, so I don't know if that has any bearing on the hatching egg side of it or not. or sorry, the table egg side of it.
So final question, Robert, are you looking to expand in the future?
I'll never say never. I would expand. Biggest problem we have currently is land capacity. For doing the first shed, we have a few sites available to us, but we'll probably just struggle with scope. You need roughly kind of 40 acres for a 32,000 free range bird unit, in order to range them. So to get another 40 acres, that would be ideal. That wouldn't upset the dairy again. I don't see it in the short term, but long term, I will not say no. I'd quite happily go ahead and do it again.
Right, thank you very much. We're going to squeeze in one more question. So any more questions that are asked after this time, we'll send you a kind of email or something after, just with the response. So that's a question for the Wee Brown Hens. Do you sell to commercial customers such as shops, restaurants, or is it just to the general public?
We sell to one farm shop in the area, but the majority of our eggs go straight to door-to-door deliveries. And that way we're making the kind of profit. It's more efficient for us because we're starting so small. We need to sell straight to the consumer.
It's not necessarily we wouldn't consider for the future, but right now we're selling everything directly to our customers, and it works better for us just now.
Something I would do in the future, but right now to really push on and get started, we need to sell straight to the consumer. Yeah,
I've done it again, but I'll squeeze another question in. Just why not? We've got a couple of minutes left. So, Wee Brown Hens again. How many acres do you have? Where did you source your boxes and labels from?
So we don't actually own any land. We're very fortunate. We only rent almost 2.5 acres of woodland that our hens are on. Packaging is from TPAC.
Yeah, it's a company up in Forth that would supply boxes to most of Scotland. I think lots of different things as well to the poultry industry, like commercial side and our side. And our labels come from a printer up in Glasgow. There's lots of different folk.
I can't actually remember.
I can't name them, but it's just a normal printer. It's not specific for egg box labels or anything.
I'll just close with that. I'd like to thank all our speakers. I'm sure you'll all agree they've been fantastic. And other than that, thank you for attending, and I hope you've taken something of it. And remember, we've got another poultry webinar coming up on the 21st of July, so please do attend that if you're interested to hear more. And if anyone has any further questions, please just email me at james.orr@sac.co.uk. And apart from that, thank you very much.